morning, everyone. Good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning. Welcome to another fine Wednesday morning. Welcome to another coffee break chat. I'm your host, James Jackson, he, they pronouns, executive producer, Late Thief Productions. We've got a great show for you today. We're going to be talking Win Some, Lose Some, the past and future of Philadelphia arts. We've got some winners and losers, including all of us on that metric, that scale. We're going to be talking about the Tonys. We're going to be talking about support for the arts in Philadelphia. And we're going to be talking Black excellence in a number of ways, including Black Doctors Row. And to talk about this with us, I'm going to bring on screen Lindsay from the Wilma. Lindsay, please introduce yourself, your pronouns, what it is you do.
Hi. Yeah, I'm Lindsay Smiling. Pronouns are he, him. I am an actor, a director, an educator, and co-artistic director of the Wilma Theater right here in Philadelphia.
Oh,
Sorry, let me rephrase that. That is now the been told I have to say this now, the Tony Award winning Wilma Theater.
you've been issued that as a directive. You must say that now every time with.
I think it's mandatory. I think it's like a legal name change.
So you're gonna have to file taxes slightly different this year, I guess. Tell me a little bit about the Tonys. I am terminally bad at awards, so like I don't watch them. I don't pay attention to them. The closest I ever got to really paying attention to awards was attending 2 seasons of the Barrymore Awards, and that's it. Tell me a little bit about the Tonys. What it means for a theater to win regional theater Tony award.
Yeah, I mean, frankly, I'm a lot like you when it comes to award shows and how they happen, why they happen. I don't really pay much attention to awards. But having said that, the this award, the Tonys, I was kind of naive about how they were about just the scope of what who gets a Tony. And so the Regional Theater Tony Award, which is the Tony that the Wilma received, I kind of vaguely knew that some theaters got something, but I didn't know the details of it. It wasn't really part of my focus as an artist. I'm not going out there trying to win awards. I'm just trying to do good art for the most part. But having said that, this one feels a little bit different. I mean, it's always good to win something, be recognized. But the way this works is like we didn't do anything, like we didn't submit anything. We just were doing our business of trying to, put together a good season and to do meaningful work and engage with the community. And what happens is a critic, and we don't have that many in Philadelphia, submits us to I think the Broadway League, and there's some people that vote. There's some adjudicators, and this year we happened to win it. So I was literally in the managing director's office, Lee Goldenberg, and we just finished talking with another co-artist director, Yuri Ernov, and we were going over the budget and figuring out like how are we gonna get through next season and get the board to approve the things we want to do that make the Wilma, including shared leadership and a resident artist ensemble, and like having it takes money to fund those things, and regional theater's not doing so well right now. But we're looking over the numbers and we're like something's going to happen, and about 10 minutes later, the phone rings, and across the little screen on the phone, it said Broadway LE, and he's like, I think I gotta
Think I
take
got to
this. I'm
take
like, yeah,
this.
yeah, you should take that. And they told us we had won the Tony, which was great, which comes with $25,000 grant, which is great. Doesn't solve our problems, but it helps a little bit. And then it was a fury of like, how do we leverage this for the theater? How do we, it was great to be recognized. It is a game changer because there is some recognition that nationally that you get. And so we're hoping, more people pay attention to Philadelphia as a whole, because it's such a great art scene, and no other theater in Pennsylvania has won the Tony before. Um, and hopefully we can leverage it to get more funding from city and state and maybe federal sources.
I was gonna bring that into the conversation. It is a prestigious award. It's national in nature, as I
Yeah,
understand.
yeah.
Um, and it's not like there are other regions or theaters or groups winning this same award. Um, this year it's
It's one a year. Yeah, you're
one
correct.
regional theater a year. Um, how do we, how do you consider part of your job description, part of your art, like really bringing attention to the fact that we as a city do this kind of quality level of work? Or is it just, is it just you guys? Is this a one-off?
No, I mean, I think the whole ethos around here at the Wilma is like we're really I mean, we have this resident artist ensemble, right? But they're hopefully feeding into other theaters the type of work. The work we're doing, it's about being honest with each other in the room. We're not like trying to get a certain aesthetic out there, although I think the Wilma does have an aesthetic, but it's not about when it comes into the Hot House does, the artist ensemble, we're really just about being vulnerable with each other and getting to a deeper place more quickly. And hopefully that'll permeate in whatever aesthetic you go to in another theater. And the people in the company are working in all of the theaters all the time, which is fantastic. So um I hopefully we can, yeah, this is about Philadelphia theater as a whole because it's works the other way too. We're bringing the other influences from other theater companies into our space as well, and seeing how they all mesh together, kind of in an intentional way. Um, Outside of a production, how do we create art is a big question. Um, and uh, I mean, I've moved back from New York to Philadelphia because the art scene was so inspiring here. Not just the money, not the money that is being thrown at it. I mean the community of artists that is the type of art, the sincerity, the boldness, the vibrancy of it. In some places it can feel like a commercial endeavor and all about trying to sell the general public on an idea or a gimmick or a visual. But when I came back to Philly and started working at the Wilma, it was really about like what is the essence of human connection and trying to get to that. And it's a ongoing practice.
I
But
mean, yeah, let's talk a little bit about,
yeah,
like how the Wilma gets at that. Like, so I've had this show going on since the beginning of the pandemic. We've talked to a lot of artists, we talked to a lot of people, and the conversation is always around how do we get more recognition of what is, what theater can be, what the arts can mean to a community,
oh sure,
and
yeah.
how it can affect a community, not just of artists, but of like the whole community. Like, having this vibrant art scene in Philadelphia, I think, is important to Philadelphia, not just from an economic perspective, but from all kinds of other perspectives. Um, and the conversation always goes back and forth. There's ebbs and flows. How do we get past the point where um, we're reproducing the same thing over and over again? The Wilma, quite frankly, does experimental work all the time, and does new things all the time and still attracts audiences. A lot of companies can't figure out how to do that. How have you guys been successful at pulling the community into this kind of conversation where we're trying new things and we're doing things that are not what you've seen last season? You know, we're not doing Christmas Carol again, but how do we get audiences to come into that not knowing what they're going to get?
Yeah, not knowing what you're gonna get. That's a dangerous territory, right?
Right.
Just of human interaction of like being willing to take a risk and our mission is about creating living adventurous art. That's in our mission statement. Um, so I think we've just talked about this quite frankly about what exactly we're trying to do and evolve the Wilma now with this new leadership. Um, and it comes down to not selling the shows, but we have a identity for the process of how we're creating the work. So even if a show isn't your cup of tea, or you don't like it, or you didn't like the material, you didn't like how the design elements, whatever about it, you're like, that didn't work for me. I think we were really trying to build trust in that we are making sincere efforts to go dive deep to get to something that is we don't have a didactic thing we're going to put on stage. We're looking for complexity. We're looking for things that don't have easy answers. We're looking things that scare us, quite frankly. So I think that shows up in the rehearsal room. That shows up in our season selection. That shows up in our conversations with our audiences. I mean, one of the things I've been a big champion of is our cafe chats and engaging after the show with just really um, uh, uh, informal conversations around what people have just experienced in the show. And so for me, the theater is a place of communing and exchange. So it isn't just our theater telling you what to think or showing you something and like it or hate it. It really is a conversation, and we're trying to grow from that. And so that's we're trying to cultivate that relationship, and I think that's gone a long way in how we view what we're doing. Like if we're just saying like, well, people just didn't get it, we're not really listening, you know. And so I hope to continue that conversation with what's happening in the community and what's happening in the arts world at large internationally as well, because that's been a big identity for the Wilma as well. So it really is about listening at the end of the day, and being willing to be vulnerable, which is acting.
How does so all the pressures that come with being leadership in the leadership of a theater. um I would say probably the biggest one that most theater makers face is keeping the lights on, keeping the money flowing so that you can build the sets, hire the actors, pay the directors, etc. How how does that square with, how do you avoid that almost knee jerk reaction to go to something safe?
Mm. Um, yeah, I think it is. I think we have a bunch of people that I mean, there are people that have that impulse to go, and that does come up. And luckily, we have this articulated mission that we can keep pointing to. And if we're not doing serving that mission, if we're not doing adventurous art, then we're not the Wilma anymore. And we've also cultivated some values around how to do that. So if things aren't feeling great for anybody in that pursuit, we could also point to the values and hopefully use those values to get people on the same page as far as that approach to the mission. Um, and we're really trying to live those. We're really trying to not make that just something that's on a wall and like, hey, we did that and check it off the list. Like it is about trying to, and as frankly, as uh, the one of the only black people in the on staff on permanent on full time staff, like I'm using those values quite frequently and pointing to them and making sure that as we come out of the pandemic and the distance of the big uh, George Floyd protests are kind of fading from people's memories and aren't coming present, that we're not forgetting the work we did over the pandemic. Um, that's kind of a side note. But I think when it comes down to funding, when it comes down to like, because it does take more money to practice care and curiosity and invest in the artists and have a resident artist company. Um, at the end of the day, it's like, well, we could just become every other regional theater in the country and just like try to have a focus on trying to get into the black as opposed to like dancing with the red um
Right.
and become like the Walnut Street Theater or something like that.
Right.
But then it's like, well, what are we doing it for? I think we're the Wilma has attracted people that appreciate the work. And I think we whenever we bring somebody into more of a permanent position, we're looking for that quality to make sure that we're looking to push boundaries, not just in the shows, but in the way we run the theater company. So,
So I'd like to kind of highlight something you said a little bit earlier, which is, like you're really concerned about leveraging this award not just for the Wilma, but
mhm.
also for Philadelphia in general and Pennsylvania. Um, I think that is indicative of what we're talking about because a lot of theaters, not to name names, but you did mention Walnut, but like there are theater makers in this city who think that the funding pool is finite. We're only going to get X number of subscribers to theater in the city of Philadelphia, and so that money is finite. The amount of money the city is willing to invest is finite, et cetera, et cetera. So, like the thinking from that perspective is that this is a pie and we need to take our biggest slice of it that we can get. This happens all over the art world, but I'm encouraged that there isn't just me out there thinking that, if somebody's winning an award, that means that there's more attention, there's going to be more people trying to see this kind of work, there's going to be more money put into the art. Um,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I want all theater companies to succeed, even Walnut Street Theater. I want them all. I want them
I
all
mean,
to like.
somebody's got to put on Shrek for the third time.
I mean, the more theater is, I mean, the arts in general, the more the arts are part of our culture as a society, I think the better we are. I forget who said it, but there was something I came across the other day about the power of storytelling and like that we tell stories to ourselves and we fight over the stories we tell, which is the reason of so many wars. It's not so much about the resources that are in the land. It's really about the stories we're telling ourselves of who we are, what our identity is, where we come from, what we believe, what our faith is. And the arts is a place to do that in a uh, uh, um, what's the word? A connective way.
hmm
Um, it is not, yeah, it's not antagonistic to tell
Well, I
your
often,
story.
I often, I often tell this story or tell this my understanding of theater this way because to my understanding, theater has a kind of deeper root in the human condition than we often acknowledge. It didn't just come from like it didn't just spring forth from Greece, or the Greek city states. it had an African root, and like if you go to modern traditions in Africa, there's modern traditions that match the roots of Greek theater and how that developed. But it's also the root of our judicial system. Like theater is kind of the root of our judicial system, where you have, like in the African tradition of theater, it's often about two groups coming together to tell the story of something that happened in order for the elders to kind of adjudicate it and say, "Oh, this is the reality. You're each telling this version of the story, but here's what's really happening." And then anyway, so
Yeah.
it for folks that aren't like well, deeply immersed in how theater works from like time immemorial, there's always been like kind of this adjudicating body to Greek theater above the fray, and then the chorus telling the story from multiple sides. But anyway, um, yeah,
No, I mean that it does. I mean, from Tadashi Suzuki talks about this in his book, "Culture is the Body of." Theater starting where in tribes we have rituals and we had things that were telling stories, and then it wasn't until we traveled to another village to witness another ritual happening, and all of a sudden we were aware that we are being watched by somebody, that this kind of idea of the theater we as we know it today exists, where the spectator is watching some type of ritual, which gets to like a whole spiritual practice, which is so interesting to me because I'm not a huge religiously practicing person at all. But there is something about for me, I always think about there's something that happens when you are telling the story that gets to something that you actually can't say in words. Like language fails us in expressing that internal experience, and it's through the culmination of theater that you kind of get to something closer than what you can read on a page or even sing. It gets to something that is underneath the language, and that's
there's
always what I'm looking for as a theater maker.
there's also always multiple perspectives in live theater that you don't quite get to it with recorded stuff. I mean, I love recorded storytelling too. I'm a
Mm-hmm.
filmmaker. I'll make a film any day of the week, but there's not the instant feedback loop that you get with like an audience there, and all those perspectives being available.
Well, it's changing all the time, right? I mean, the story is literally the theater is changing every night. Like every time you go through it, every time you tell a story, the story changes. It might not look like it from, you might like, oh, that light came up at that cue and that person moved over to that area of the stage and that line. But there is something small but significant that changes from night to night. We're different human beings at every given moment. So there's something about that feels immediate in a way that I totally am like, will love sitting down and watching a movie or TV or streaming anything or just even scrolling mindlessly on Facebook, whatever. I appreciate all those mediums, but there is something that grounds me when I go to theater that doesn't happen all the time in other art forms.
Yeah, and also yeah, and uh, there's also something to the actors constantly exploring, even through the process, even through the and the not only through the rehearsal process but through the entire production, kind of exploring how their characters are telling their individual parts of the story, and being open to um, their character receiving different input from the other characters on stage with them, being receptive to just kind of the feel of the room. I know it does start to sound metaphysical and kind of worshipful when you get into it. It's a little.
There's there's so many shows that I've closed, and like 2 weeks later, I'd be like, oh, that's what that was about. like That's what I meant in that, or that was the whole thing. I should have tried that. And like, yeah, it lives with you for a while.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to talk a little bit about, operating a theater in the city of Philadelphia, what it's like, I not to beat up on the kind of money aspect, but we we often gauge how much support we have by how much money we can bring in. It is kind of a direct way of assessing the job that we're doing. Um, the city of Philadelphia obviously, supports the arts to some extent. I've done lots of work to try and get more support for the arts from the city. Other people have as well. Um, it's a tiring effort, but hopefully a good effort. We're um, with the change in administration, we're seeing kind of a de-emphasis of the arts, I would say.
Hmm.
It's not been mentioned as much, but in the new budget, the art museum is up 5%, the mural arts is up 4.6%. But the OACCE, the Office of Arts, Culture, and the Creative Economy, got cut by $2 million, and that's where the Philadelphia Cultural Fund gets its money. Um, and we didn't really even talk about it much. I think in the community as part of like affecting the budget and affecting our lawmakers this year. I don't think we really did much to lobby as much as we've done in the past to lobby and kind of push for more support in the arts. Where do you as a group of leaders in a theater, um, how do you apply your influence? What do you think is the most effective way to apply your influence on this kind of thing?
Sure, we are. I mean, we are as the Wilma doing as best we can to. We need. I mean, we need a lobbyist. We need to hire a lobbyist to do this work because we are just trying to run a theater company, and that's just hard enough as it is. But we are trying to use our connections. We're bringing the Tony to the governor today, and definitely arts funding is going to be part of that conversation. And every chance we've had to interact with politicians, we had Rue Landau here, who's very much happening on board with us and trying to sponsor some legislation. And Mary Gay Scanlon also was here. Nikhil Saval has um, started to take up the issue. So we're starting to do it as a individual theater, but I think what would be really useful is if we had an organization that represented all of the theaters of Philadelphia. Like I was just in Chicago at the TCG conference, and the League of Chicago Theaters was talking about they just passed a tax for Illinois that goes to arts funding. It's small, I think 0.1% tax, but it provided so much money for theaters across the state. Um,
Well, I
and
mean,
so we don't
traditionally,
have that.
just to put the numbers in context, the Philadelphia budget has you traditionally a 0.01%
Yeah,
towards the arts, and like that's not even that's not even a whole percent. We
yeah,
got 0.9% to go there to even get to 1% for the arts, and it doesn't it baffles me because.
yeah. It's a. I mean, it does so much. I mean, you talked about alluded to it earlier. I mean, it's not just the economic impact. It's also, it's also. I mean, there is tourism. There's also just there's the wellness of human mental health, and there's safety with more people on the streets. And I mean, it's
And it's also a relatively so the thing that I always am fascinated by, it's a really low barrier to entry for expressive exploration of like your own psyche.
Yeah,
Whether you're an audience member or on stage, like you get
absolutely.
this time to explore things that like, and I don't know how to express it probably best, but it's it's healing for both the audience and for the people producing the pieces.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, and to get back to like that experience at in Chicago with the at the TCG conference, they have this organization, the League of Chicago Theaters, that is advocating for the theater community, and don't really have that is has that hired that could hire a lobbyist. Uh, that we're trying to get together with other artistic directors and managing directors across the city, just kind of go through like Zoom meetings and sessions, but it's not a well, like everybody's trying to run their theater as well. So we it's there's only so much capacity we have to take on this cause, which needs some devoted and intentional efforts, and we just don't have the organization right now that is in the position to reach out to our politicians to advocate for us in that way. So running, a theater company like ours, it's real challenging when the city isn't and state aren't funding us in comparison to what they are in other markets.
Yeah, and even I often even kind of throw the comparison out the window. You don't even need to compare
Yeah.
when you look at the benefits. You look at the I mean the for what it's worth, the Greater Philadelphia Cultural Alliance does a lot of good work in research and documenting kind of the knock on effects of funding the arts. And the work that they've done has shown, like, there is a measurable economic return on investment for investing in the arts for the city of Philadelphia, and it in essence doesn't cost the city of Philadelphia anything to invest in the arts because they get it all back in increased taxes and increased spending. But yeah, the it's fascinating that message doesn't seem to get through, like maybe because it's such a varied message, like we're talking about effects from everything from it's a safety measure, it's a social betterment measure. It's also like gives people the opportunity to express themselves. It creates jobs. It does this. It does, and like when you start to look at it that way, you kind of go, oh, that sounds like it's too good to be true. That can't be right.
Yeah,
Um, but yeah,
yeah, and it's and the other component to it is it's getting it's just getting more expensive to produce theater. Like in the subscription model is a little bit uh, people aren't as willing to subscribe, although our subscriptions are bumping up a little bit, but industry wide subscriptions are people are just doing show by show, which makes it really hard to plan a season. Just with, but I don't want to get it too much in the weeds with cash flow and all that,
no,
but
no,
it
no.
does.
I mean, I think that people, anybody who's ever been interested in producing the arts could probably like watch a show like Slings and Arrows and kind of understand
Yeah.
that necessity to like constantly be balancing budget versus everything else never goes away, no matter how big your theater is.
But even with like the with drawing people in, it's costing. It used to be like, I want to say like 43 cents it costs you in advertising to bring in a dollar for, and now it's like $1.13 to bring in a dollar. So it's hard to bring in audiences. The pandemic really hit us hard, even though audiences were declining before that. But I'm really kind of proud of the work we've been doing. Not to pat ourselves too much on the back, but we're really trying to cultivate a sense that everybody belongs here in at our theater space, and that I think goes a long way to this idea of we're not just trying to sell this really great show that we did. We know every show is not going to be Fat Ham. We know every show, some shows are gonna, rub people the wrong way, but hopefully we can garner some trust with our audiences that they will know us with not only the artist ensemble but the other staff and full time members here that we are starting to feel like a third space for people. Uh,
Uh,
not their work, not their home, but
right.
place that they can go, like they can feel
That they
where they
can
belong.
feel comfortable. I have what may be an odd question for you, or one that you haven't considered. So feel free to take your time with it.
Okay.
Um, what would you say is so when you win an award like this, you get people feeding back, like things that you've said to you. I've noticed I always get people feeding back, like when I get a review or I get an award, I get people telling me things that I've said. Um, what is the most surprising or like smallest thing that you thought would never come back to you or that you would never hear again that you've actually heard through this process?
Oh man, that's a tough question. Um, yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure. Because I don't know if it's still kind of new. Like the word is still people mostly are just congratulating us on the win and haven't been too much uh reflecting on the journey. Um, and because my journey with the Wilma is so long,
Right.
it's been my first show here was right out of grad school in 2003. Um, and which is wild that to go from a I mean, people have said to me, you've come a long way since Resurrection Blues, which was the first show I did at the Wilma, where I had like five lines and three of them were in Spanish, uh, and uh, and yeah, to being an artistic director, and then when being part of the company that won the Tony, or sorry, received the Tony is the correct terminology for
Received.
received the Tony. But yeah, I don't know. I don't think I've had like
Do you
some
feel like you've come
language.
a long way?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yes, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Grad school, you come out and you have some type of ambition or some type of expectation of what success looks like. And artistic director was not a goal for me at all. Winning a Tony actually wasn't really a goal. I really was focused on just trying to do good work and figure out just not figure out, but keep questioning who I am on a regular basis through my art. And that took me to New York for a while. I mean, just being a black actor, people have a lot of expectations about who you are, and so when you're trying to like figure out who you are on a daily basis, that's a long that's a confusing journey. That's a sometimes painful journey, particularly when there was a point where I didn't have any legal residence. Really. I had a PO box, and all my stuff was in a storage unit, and I was just sleeping on people's couches in New York. And trying getting work here and there, but it's hard. And finding some stable ground financially and investing in the question of why am I doing art and what does it mean for me? Because there were a few turning points in my career where I was starting to get some momentum and there were some larger contracts that came up, but didn't feel like they were artistically aligned with what I was looking for, and I had to turn those down when I didn't have anything else and didn't have a stable financial situation. So um, I think that's kind of what led me to this leadership position, was kind of trusting in that question and looking for that question as a whole.
Well, I think that kind of mirrors, kind of the decisions you've been making at the Wilma. Just uh, being willing to turn down the sure thing, because you're seeking something else. Um, I think that's always been a hard part of my career as well.
Mhm.
Um, and even still, I get that question wrong sometimes. Like, I'll take on a
Yeah,
project and it'll turn out awful because it's not
yeah,
the right project for that moment.
yeah. But
Yeah,
that's okay. That's like, that's being like, that's part of it, right? That's part of that journey. It's like being willing, like failure is not a bad thing. It's not a dirty word. Failure is you should be failing at
yeah.
things.
If you don't fail every once in a while, how do you know when you're succeeding, right?
Yeah,
Um, I guess by having bestowed awards from
yeah, yeah.
national
I mean,
organizations. No, I'm kidding. But I would like to talk a little bit of local news. Talk about a Philadelphia neighborhood. The area of Christian Street, between Broad and 20th, was recently renamed, and or I would say even somewhat acknowledged as Black Doctors Row. They're calling this Graduate Hospital. I don't know about the whole graduate hospital thing. The naming of neighborhoods in Philadelphia has a long and storied history, but yeah. This area, I don't know. How familiar are you with like the Christian Street area?
um, somewhat
Yeah.
familiar, not in depth. I mean, I know the area. I've been around there, but I haven't spent too much time there.
I haven't spent a whole lot of time there. It was one of the areas I was considering moving when I moved out of West Philadelphia. I ended up in South Philadelphia, but a lot closer to the Broad Street line. But one of my old coworkers lived at 20th and Christian, and I just thought that was the longest way to get. Like, it took the longest to get from there to anywhere in the city, of anywhere I've been in the city. Um,
Uh-huh.
but yeah, the area, it has a lot of famous and storied buildings. The First African Baptist Church, the YMCA, and at its peak from 1910 through around 1945, these 6 blocks were home to prominent black pastors, doctors, teachers, architects, politicians, etc., etc., etc. Um, and I think this is kind of interesting and fascinating. Like we rarely get to celebrate black excellence even in this city of majority black residents. Um, is this something that impacts, how does this impact, I would say, um how, your thought process when making theater here? Like, how does the being in the founding city of the country, being in a majority black city, um being one of the only black members of the staff of this theater, how does it affect your process, your approach to the theater making, the your approach to conversations, even when you're thinking about this?
Um, it's a great question. Yeah. I mean, I definitely, I definitely use moments like this to advocate for Black voices um, in this space. And whether intentional or not, there's a default setting around what theater looks like, and I'm constantly advocating. Even before I got into an artistic director position, I was advocating that the acting company reflected what the city looks like. The demographics of the city should be reflected of the acting company. And so, that's somewhat like what, we have half of our acting company is Black, which is great. Even more so, we should keep pushing that. Not that it's perfect. There's still lots of demographics. You're never going to be perfect with representation, but you keep making the best attempts. But when something like this happens, it's just like, because a lot of when we're picking shows, and there's three of us now. It's not just me. There's three of us talking about what shows and what's going to sell, and that is part of the conversation. Um, I will not hesitate to say it's a Black show. It's going to sell. It's going to be successful. Like we need to do this work. We need to have variety in the stories that we're putting on stage for variety. I mean, in the Black experience, and so finding varied stories within that identity. So having something like this is like, yeah, that's amazing. This is uh this is another like thing when I'm going through scripts. I'm like, yeah, this connects to what's happening in this city. This moment just happened. So should this story celebrates that in a great way. Or we'll take this classical text and frame it around what's happening uh, in a moment like that. So I'll say, it all folds in. We're not and I don't think we're in a place that is operating in a vacuum. We are having conversations about what is relevant to our community, and so keeping a tab on how we are reclaiming space as Black bodies is definitely part of my initiative and leadership.
Um, how do we continue to claim that space? How what is the best way? So we mentioned early on, the George Floyd protests, kind of, and the social zeitgeist kind of awareness of Black truth,
Mm-hmm.
kind of fading.
Mm-hmm.
We've there's always going to be a pushback, right? There's always going to be like, my dad used to always say, no matter how far the pendulum swings, it's going to swing the other way. um there's always going to be some sort of pushback, but it seems really fraught right around this upcoming presidential election and leading up to the past mayoral election in Philadelphia. Kind of, how do we get the recognition of the Black experience back into the focus of the cultural zeitgeist without sounding like we're beating a dead horse, for lack of a better term?
Yeah. I mean, I think you know, anybody in a leadership position like myself, it's a day-to-day thing. You're constantly reminding people, which is exhausting. But
Which is
but
exhausting, yeah. But
it's exhausting. But
and how do you, how do you do it without becoming, I don't know, annoying, for lack of a better term? Like, I oftentimes feel like I'm starting to sound like, like I'm saying the same things over and over again. I'm constantly pushing for, more Black representation on crews, more Black representation on art, in the artistic design elements, more Black representation here, there, everywhere. And how do I do that without you know, sounding like, uh, I don't know.
Yeah, I think everybody will have a different answer to that question. Yeah, I'm reminded of the session that I just was in at the TCG conference with Dominique Morisseau and Erica Henderson, and they were both kind of like having different ideas of what art and activism looks like, and they're very contentious actually about the language around that. But I think for me, what I try to do is be strategic about when I'm making a point. When is it a reminder, or when is it a decision making moment? Um, there is yeah, and also to give myself grace. I was like, I don't have to say anything today, or I'm choosing not to. I'm just gonna like for
Just
my
don't
own
have the
mental
spoons
health.
today.
I'm just not gonna. I'm just gonna let that. I'm gonna put that in a to do list and come back to it maybe a few days later. But like for instance, when a position opens up, and that's a moment to advocate, right? And that's what I've tried to do here is like as we're considering hiring this position, just look around. And I'm tired of being the only one going to whatever social event, whatever. Uh, so there's those moments. There's also like for me, advocating for shows, and I'm very excited and scared to tackle this play, Half God of Rainfall, next season, which is it's not a huge cast, but it's a larger cast, and when people are talking about, as I alluded to earlier, like what's going to be a hit, what was people going to respond to? I'm like, I think this one's going to be responsive, and a couple of people didn't quite understand the story, and yeah, at the end of the day, I was like, you're just gonna have to trust me
Yeah,
because I'm have a different relationship to this material than you do, and
right.
um so it's great to have a thing I'll come back to like the articulation of values, articulation of what we're trying to do, and so it doesn't become a personal vendetta or a personal like soapbox you got to stand on. It's like this is what we as an organization said we're going to do, and if we're not doing it, then we need to rethink what that is, and we can't say that we're doing
Right.
it. And so that's
How do,
I, I'm
so
not going to pretend to know to have the solution, but that's what I'm trying to do right now, and
how does
I hope.
having kind of this multi-part leadership mesh with that? Like how to when other leaders in the organization don't have the same interpretation of the vision, how do you
Mhm.
is it a democratic process? Do you just argue it out? What happens?
Well, I mean, then you start. So you have these like this mission statement, right? Like an to be transparent, like another play on the that I kind of offered as like a second choice was top dog underdog, and it's probably will draw people. Is adventurous? Is that does that does that feel like a Wilma show? And then we can have that conversation around that, uh, rather than this kind of newer play that is more about Orisha deities and basketball and patriarchy. Then we could start to like have the conversation around the material, and it becomes less. Then I think we can make some progress in it if they don't see it in that way. Uh, and you just have to be, you know, at the end of the day, I have to like trust that it's being heard, and just keep saying what I have to say.
So, just this will be the last thing, and we'll wrap up. It's 10:58. But we were talking about political support for the arts, and the folks that you've mentioned are all very progressive politicians. They're not even, I wouldn't even consider them classically liberal. They're just
Mhm,
literally progressive politicians, not,
mhm.
they wouldn't rank as Democrats in the national scene. Um, and we just had an election in which, kind of it was progressive Democrats versus, like classical neoliberal Democrat. And the neoliberal Democrat won pretty handily. What what does that say to you with regards to, so obviously, like, these folks that have progressive politics and understanding of kind of the social issues around local politics tend to be supportive of the arts. They tend to be exploratory, understanding, thinking forward. What does that say, for politics in general, local politics in general? Is the community not there with us? Do we need to do, is this something that we need to communicate more clearly, or is this just not, maybe we're being loopy and we don't understand what the reality is on the street?
Uh, yeah, that's a question for politicians, right? Um,
Well, no,
but
I always think, I always, what I always say is that when I have guests there, I've had guests that are like, oh, I don't know anything about this. I'm like, you're an artist. You can come up with an
no,
answer in like 0.5 seconds. I don't really need to
no,
give.
no. I mean, I think that is, I think it's all the more case to do daring art, and also not just to do daring art, but to be in conversation around the daring art, so that it isn't just like doing something bold and then if you don't get it, you don't get it, but actually to engage with people that have questions around it and see how complex and nuanced every little thing is in the world. Because nuance is the thing that is, I think, eroding quicker and quicker around any issue. Um, and I think theater is a space that we can hold complexity in a really beautiful and generous way. Um, I think around, and I think that speaks to the more progressive social issues is when you can see yourself, as you alluded to, many perspectives of a story, and have empathy around the different bodies on stage, different bodies in the audience, even. Then then I think we're making progress in a certain way. I think they might start to lean politically uh, into some of these more into the candidates that have more social issues on their docket. Uh, um, so is it frustrating? Yes. Is it when you go to like a cafe chat with after a show and it you feel um, kind of a neoliberal kind of ideology rearing its head over a story that is much more complex and nuanced and humanistic, then you have to engage with that. Um, I think that's the challenge is engaging with it. The categorization only does so much, and I think uh, like we have to get back to like the human side of it. And I think that will push people towards these issues that are more about social change. Um, but that's a guess. That's
Well,
what I was coming up with. Sure.
as theater people, I think, like, what we do constantly holds some sort of image or mirror to what the social action, what society around us. I don't think our seasons or our stories or even how we tell them comes from nowhere. It doesn't come from the script even entirely. It comes from what's going on with those individuals who are on stage with the audience. You can't tell a story to an audience and win an award by telling a story that the audience doesn't resonate with. So, congratulations to you guys for resonating with your audiences and
Yeah,
telling stories in a way that other people recognize as valuable. Um,
thank you.
um, any last thoughts before we go? Anything you want to highlight in your upcoming season or anything else?
Um, I mean, it's exciting. It's an exciting season. I mean, we've got a variety of things for people. Comeuppances, Brendan Jacobs Jenkins, just won a Tony for another play. He's a really amazing playwright, and excited to kind of have this magical realism play that he's put on the table, and then a play that I'm directing this focusing on Orisha deities, West African deities, um, and basketball, and this kind of melding of mythology and consumerism. And yeah, it held so much in a very poetic way. And then Blanca Ziska coming back to direct the show, which is always a wonderful thing. And so this is the first time since stepping down as an artistic director that she's coming back to the stage. And then we have a Nobel Prize winning author in Jan Foss finishing out the season. From who not many Americans know about him. So we've got a whole slew of interesting stuff that you won't see anywhere else. So and then also Pig Iron's doing a presentation to start off our season during Fringe. It was the cabaret around the music of Amy Mann. That's you know Dito and Alex Bechtel are kind of geniuses. So some
Awesome.
exciting stuff around here.
That all sounds fascinating, and hopefully you'll have an excellent turnout for the next season. I'm sure it won't be as difficult to get butts in seats as usual with a prestigious award being bestowed upon you guys.
I
Um,
hope so. You never know it's Philly though, so
yeah,
you never know what Philly's going to respond to.
yeah,
But we
right.
hope so.
Yeah, it might be like, you guys sold out.
Yeah, never know.
All right. I'm gonna go to one up of me. Thank you for joining me this week. I really appreciate it. Please come back on the show and promote your next season as it comes out. Appreciate the conversation. Hopefully you enjoyed it as well.
I did. I did. Would love to come back.
Awesome. I'll talk to you soon then, and I'm gonna go to one up of me. Feel free to hang out in the chat if you'd like to chat afterwards, and I'm gonna outro this show.
Great.
Um, Thank you, everybody, for watching. Really appreciate you paying attention to what's going on in Philadelphia, what's going on in politics and art. We try and bring you unique stories from a unique perspective so that you can kind of see what's going on in your local world. This doesn't just apply to us here in Philly. Having a vibrant arts scene is important to everyone everywhere. Lots of folks invest in the arts and recognize this from a political level, but some folks don't. I just hope that you value the arts that we have here in Philadelphia, and we'll keep bringing you stories as we can, not just about the arts, but about what's going on in our world. And we don't, I believe, do not have a show planned for next week yet. However, we may be going on hiatus for the summer. If we can get a couple of the guests that we've been looking for to join us here in July, we'll get them on. But it'll be a surprise for you guys. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, because if you're subscribed, on whatever format you watch this, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, Live Push itself, especially Twitch and YouTube and Facebook, they'll all notify you when I go live. If you're subscribed, so hit that subscribe button, and you'll get a notification next time we're planning a show. And with that, I hope you all enjoy the rest of your week. Tune in again when you see we're going live, and we'll bring you a new show and more information. And thanks for watching, everybody.